From the John DeVita Broadcast Center, welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another broadcast of Armchair Experts with Jim Leon and Rich Massaro on the Windy City Hometown Entertainment Network and Jack FM 89.7 WRHS FM Norwich on Wednesday, January the 24th, the year 2018. And now here they are with a great big smile on their face.
And a song in their hearts.
Jim and Rich.
I'm looking, just happened to glance down. There's a clipboard that's always here, and somebody took some interesting notes.
He's looking at somebody else's notes.
I'm looking at somebody else's notes. I see WIND, Howard Miller, Milt Rosenberg, may he rest in peace.
Yeah.
Wally Phillips, Breakfast. And then somebody wrote something and circled it, and it fascinates me, and I wonder what the conversation was about ankle holster.
Oh.
Yesterday we had Meet the Chicago Historians, and the topic was
ankle holsters.
Radio broadcasting in Chicago. And we were talking about just the people that you said there, Wally Phillips, Howard Miller,
Milt Rosenberg.
Yeah. And quite the old-time radio guys that used to be on radio years ago.
I think one of the most, the one of Milt Rosenberg's broadcast I always remember is years ago, and it might have been not long after they started Extension 720. He had four guys on that night who were voiceover artists, and they also did impressions. And it was during the baseball strike. So what, in the 70s, 74 when it was, I can't even remember.
I think so.
But one of them, or two of them, did Harry and Jimmy doing the White Sox game that would have been scheduled that night. And two other guys did Brickhouse and Cupsinet doing a Bear game.
Oh, man, that would have been fun.
Starting with Cupsinet's halftime show.
Oh, geez.
Talking about the very wonderful Dr. Bill McCall, who's in our booth now, and the very wonderful Dr. Jonas Salk, who didn't play football but invented the very wonderful polio vaccine that was named after him. And the topper was the four guys did the sports writers on radio. Man. And Dr. Rosenberg was Ben Bentley.
Oh, okay.
Dr. Rosenberg was Ben Bentley, and he had it down pretty well, too.
Good.
Gentlemen, we must come to order.
I was going to say, if I read as many books as Milt Rosenberg, I think my head would explode. And I like to read, but that guy is unbelievable.
I mean, there was some quote, and I think it came from, on his passing, somebody went back and found a quote from John Calloway that said something to the effect of, if somebody can ask a question quoting 2 books in 4 languages, they're prepared.
Yeah.
They're prepared.
By the way, Jim...
Which is much more than we ever do. I realize
no, we don't get prepared at all.
Oh.
I wanted to mention to you, if I hadn't mentioned to you last broadcast, Linda DeBello wants you, not you specifically, but you in general, to like the Facebook page. I believe it's Almost Bowie.
Almost Bowie.
Yes.
Which is a tribute band. I think I may have already.
Yeah. Okay.
I think I may have done that already. I'll have to. I'll have to go back and look.
So that is a tribute band. I was having a hard time figuring out what exactly it was, even when I saw the page. So.
I think it's a tribute band.
Okay.
It sounds like that.
Okay. Very good.
So, all right, we've got the
got
the nonsense out of the way.
That takes stuttering start here.
That knocks off about 4 minutes.
That was good. We only got 56 more minutes to go.
Hey, here's a thought. And this has been kind of stirring around in my head over the last, certainly during the NHL bye week, and then the first 2 games the Hawks played afterwards and really laid a couple of stinkers.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, one of the major causes of this lack of effort, one of the major causes, besides the fact that Seabrook and Keith seem to be old,
Yeah, they're old.
is you lose your all-star goalie for probably maybe the rest of the year.
That's what they're saying.
You are out of the playoff picture right now. When it comes close to playoff, or when it comes close to the trading deadline, think they should be sellers? Take advantage of this?
I think that my opinion is I think they were going to trade whether they're sellers or buyers. My feeling is that all of the young defensemen that I've seen play some goodly portions of time here may give you a hint to. Now I know Seabrook. I don't think he can actually be traded. I'm not sure about Keith.
I don't know. You know.
But they're in a jam. I would even say this: that I think some of the new rules have hurt them. You know, at the face-off circle for one, I know that Taves for one still has a high percentage of face-offs that he wins, but he also gets kicked out of the face-off circle on a fairly regular basis. So that's come into play. That one of the biggest problems they do have is in the face-off circle because it's really affecting their possession game because they don't have the puck initially a lot of times. The other thing that I would say is the league has cracked down on a lot of hooking and that type of thing. And I'll tell you what, Jonathan Taves must have done a lot of hooking in previous years because he's spending some time in the box this year.
He's spending more time in the box than
he has in the past. So I think a few things. I think the salary cap, again, has because they invested so much money in whatever it was, a half a dozen players, I think that's hurting them. I think the one player other than Crawford was performing well. Kane is always seems to be he seems to do well no matter who he's with. But I would say, you know, Seabrook, Keith, Taves, they all seem to have taken a step back, the best way I could put it. Big thing, too, what nobody has really mentioned in the media at all, at least that I've heard, is the loss of Marian Hossa. I mean, how important was Marian Hossa?
I mean, Hossa had a pretty good year last year, if my memory serves me.
Yeah, he did.
And nobody's really discussed that. Now, you've had a couple of the young players step up. DeBrincat, is that the way it is?
Yeah, DeBrincat.
Or DeBrincat.
I'd say the young guys are playing pretty well.
Yeah.
I think the old guys might actually be slowing them down a little bit.
I think they are, and I think the surprise, probably the shock to me last year, was how Nashville handled them in the first round. Suddenly, you looked at this team and went, "My God, they got old suddenly."
Well, I think the other thing that nobody talks about, and I don't know, I'll use the term hitting the wall, although it might not be the right term. But when you are, say, guys like Taves and Keith and Seabrook and Kane and Crawford, and you've been to the well so many times as far as making it to the finals and winning Stanley Cups and whatnot, at some point, is there a saturation point where you're telling yourself, yeah, I'm motivated, I'm into it, but that's all you're doing is really telling yourself, and maybe you really aren't as motivated as you could be. And I think maybe that is a little bit of the problem with the Hawks. I think that these guys have been to the well so many times that maybe jaded is a bad word because I don't think it's the right one, but you get my meaning. I think they have just done it too many times, and it's just not working for them anymore.
Are we reaching the point, and I've wondered that, and you can't argue about the success the man has, is Quenneville just starting to fall on deaf ears after all these years? Is there a need for Is there a need for a new voice?
Yeah, it could be. The only question is who that new voice is. I found it, though, interesting that, and I don't know who the gentleman's name is, but the Hawks got rid of their longtime coach at Rockford at the end of last year and brought in a younger guy who's like in the 32, 33-year-old category. Now, I haven't heard much of him since that hire, but when that happened, because there was really no apparent reason that the old coach should go other than to bring in the new coach, my thought is that maybe a guy that they have their eye on as possibly that being the next guy behind the bench.
You kind of wonder. By the way, Rockford and let's see, as of today, Tuesday, as we record this, Rockford is tied with the Wolves with 49 points in the Central Division.
Okay.
Basically, records. Well, let's see. The Wolves are 21-15-5 in 2 shootout losses, and Rockford is 22-16-2 with 3 shootout losses.
No, you know what? When you talk about the minor league numbers too, I wonder, in my mind, no matter which team you're talking about, how much do those numbers mean, because of the situation in the minors is so fluid. I mean, you really have, as a minor league team, if the big team decides to bring up player A, and maybe that's obviously maybe a player that's been clicking for you. Now you have to obviously change on the fly. And I just think the minor leagues, whether it's hockey, baseball, or whatever, is a tough thing because of the situation.
I would think so.
So
I would think so, and surprisingly, when you think how close level-wise the AHL is to the NHL, theoretically.
Mm-hmm.
You watch an AHL game, and I'll confess, I haven't been to a Wolves game in a couple of years.
Mm-hmm.
And you watch an NHL game, the NHL game is much faster.
Yeah.
Much faster.
And
there's less of the BS and fighting in the NHL than there is in the minor league.
Sure. Well, yeah, you very rarely see a fight in the NHL. At least watching the Hawks, they don't fight very much. So
no, not as much.
But I think, Jim, to get back to your question, I think changes are going to come. I don't know when they're going to come, if it'll be the end of the season or if some of them will begin to come as we get closer to the trade deadline. But, yeah, I think the time is right.
I think, honestly, they could, they probably should listen to offers for anybody.
Yeah, you would think.
I can't imagine them giving up. I can't imagine them giving up Kane.
No.
I would not be terribly shocked, even though he is the face of the franchise. I wouldn't be terribly shocked if Tays ever got traded.
Jim, here's the problem. If you're sitting there and you're Stan Bowman, you could see that things are not working. But I think one of the problems is if you start to make a lot of changes, how is that all going to fit together? There's no guarantee that that's all going to fit together. You're hoping, you're keeping your fingers crossed.
Right.
And so you're in a situation of, if you stand pat, at least you know what you have, even though that may not be working the way you want. But if you start to make moves, how are the guys who you bring in, are they going to be the same type of guys that you really want? Are they going to blend in with the guys who are already there? It's a trickier thing than I think. Simply writing it on a piece of paper and then having it printed in the newspaper, that's the easy part. But the guys who really have to figure it out because it's going to affect them, it's a little trickier than that.
And I said in response to your first comment, that's going to happen in any trade. But as I sat there and thought about this, probably more so in hockey.
Yeah,
because you're going to have to start looking at pairings. Mm-hmm. You're going to have to start looking at your lines and where might this guy fit in. You think he may be good here, but no, maybe he's got to be down on the third line because there's a weakness there.
Well, there's another thing, talking about the Hawks, that I think I've mentioned this to you before. when I first started to watch these Hawks with Quenneville as coach, it took me a while to get my mind around the fact that he played so much with his line pairings because obviously I go back and you go back to the days of Bobby Hull and Stan Mikita, and those lines, if they ever changed, I wasn't aware of it. I thought those guys pretty much stuck together. You had the Scooter line, you had the
$1 million
$1 million line.
Yeah.
And those guys
go later. You had
the MPH line.
Didn't we have the RPMs? Too?
Or RPM line, I should say. Not
MPH. MPH was somebody else.
Yeah, that was somebody else. Is right.
Some other team.
But RPM, you're right. And those lines stuck together. So, and then when Quenneville, I started to watch the Hawks with Quenneville as the coach, and obviously he likes to mix up the lines. It worked, but one of the things that's been on my mind about this, and I'm not trying to, I'm not a hockey expert by any stretch of the imagination, but I'm thinking to myself, maybe the trick is to put some lines together and keep them together and see if until they click. Because when you keep mixing and matching,
nobody gets the opportunity.
Yeah, and and I'm thinking maybe that is part of. Maybe that's part of the problem. Maybe you need to stick with something for a while to see whether it works. I remember one year in softball, we were struggling with the bat for about 5-6 games, and somebody came to me. One of the guys came to me with a new lineup, and I said no. I thought the lineup we had was right. It just was not happening yet, and eventually that lineup did kick in and started to produce. So. That's I don't know. That's my thought. I just think it's something to think about. I don't think it's going to happen, but I would like to maybe see it tried.
Okay. I noticed looking at the transactions today in the Sun-Times, Anisimov has been activated. So,
did anybody get sent down or anything?
No, nothing listed.
Well, here's, the other thing I was going to say now, and you know what? I didn't put my thoughts together on the lines. When Quenneville initially mixed the lines up, you were talking about all guys that had basically been brought up through the Hawks organization, so they were familiar with each other, so you could mix and match. Now you have that to a lesser degree. So if you have guys that came from other organizations, you got Anisimov, you got Duclair, you've got, I can't name all the guys. Saad was with a different organization and came back. Now that mixing and matching is more problematic because they have not all come up under the same system. And, that could be part of the whole situation as well.
That could be.
That really brings me to, I was thinking a little bit about the Bulls as we came in, because I saw that, I want to say it's got to be Joel Cowley said, I know the Bulls lost in double overtime, I believe double overtime last night. And he said, on the front page of the sports section, he says, winning is losing, or losing is winning, I should say. And one of the things that I've been thinking about is, Mirotich's name has been brought up often as a possible trade chip. And I'm thinking to myself, you know what? You know what you have here. And, when you draft, of course, you're going to add to what you have, hopefully. But to say trade a guy like Mirotic, who you see is, playing nicely at this point in time, to draft somebody that you don't have any clue, is this guy going to be a good player in the league? Is he going to fit in on this team? What's he going to bring to the team? I think that's another thing that is very problematic. I mean, a lot of people are pushing, let's get the draft picks. Let's tank. I'm not really for that mindset.
This team is better.
Way better.
Than a team that, you go back to Philadelphia for the however many years.
When they won 9 games or whatever.
Yeah, when they did that. This team is better than that, surprisingly.
Yeah, no, they're playing way better.
They're surprisingly better than that. And where are we talking standing-wise now? I haven't looked for a couple of days what their record is.
It's like 18-29, I think, is the record. So you're 47 games in. I would have,
Yeah, 18 and 29.
Jim, when they started off 3-20, I probably would have bet a lot of money that they would never see 18 wins at all.
Oh, I thought if they saw 18 wins,
That would have been a big thing.
that would have been a big. That would have been a big thing.
But
I
all credit to Hoiberg and credit to the players because they never quit. They have not quit on the season.
No, they haven't. And you look at this, if who's going to bring them something? Lopez?
Yeah, well, I mean, even
I'm not going to be surprised if Lopez is traded.
no. Although I think he brings something really valuable to the team. I mean, his
I know he does.
His and there's been games now where even though this team is built to run, I think what I really like seeing out of Hoiberg, there's been games where Lopez has been the leading scorer because I don't know the league that well, but my impression would be if there's a matchup that they can take an advantage of with him having the ball in his hands, they're doing it. And I want to say a couple games ago, a win over whoever, he had 20 points and he was the leading scorer in that game.
He and Grant were the leading scorers last night against the Pelicans with 22.
Oh, so Jaron Grant had 22.
Yeah.
There's the other thing. I think my hat's off to Hoiberg because Jaron Grant was a guy that the sports writers wanted to kick to the curb, and Chris Dunn came and he took the starting job from Grant, and I think that was probably merited. But Grant, I believe, at least I'm thinking that Hoiberg has kept his head in it. And with Dunn being out with under concussion protocol, Grant has come in and obviously last night had a strong game. So
he may be out for a while. Dunn may be out for a while.
Well, I didn't see the play, but when you hit face first from up high, he's lucky he's got teeth left in his head.
Yeah,
I'm surprised.
No kidding. I saw the clip, and that one was. Ooh.
Well, there's always hope, though, Jim, because if Dunn is out for any length of time, the Bulls maybe at the trade deadline will trade and bring Derrick Rose back.
The doctor is shaking his head and staring at us and looking at us like, how could you? Jeez.
You know what? When we were talking about Dunn being out for a while, John sort of turned and looked at us, so I figured I got to get the Derrick Rose.
Yeah.
So you did. You saw the play on TV. You were watching. Oh, Oscar did. Yeah.
Yeah, it was kind of ugly. I saw the highlights, and it was ooh. That's one of those you kind of look at and go, ooh, boy.
Yeah.
You know.
Now, last night, Jim, how did Zach LaVine do? I know there's been a lot of talk about him coming back and
well, they're increasing the minutes a little bit. He's
increasing his minutes
up to 24 and change, and had 19 points.
Yeah, I think he could score. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah,
and he seems like a good head as well. Every time I've seen him quoted in the papers or whatever, he seems to be a team type of guy.
Yeah.
I really think the Bulls, to me right now, it looks like the Bulls made a solid trade. Jimmy Butler for the three players they got, Dunn, LaVine, and Markkanen.
Yeah.
Is that the way you say his name, Markkanen or Markkanen?
Markkanen.
Sure.
Markkanen. He essentially became, they were the draft pick. And people kind of questioned that pick. Some people questioned that pick at first.
Mm-hmm.
And some people said, you got a new Dirk Nowitzki.
Yeah. Yeah.
And and you find someone who got to 100 3-pointers faster than anybody ever did, any rookie ever did.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
I thought
he's got a great touch.
A while back, Tom Thibodeau had said that if they hadn't made the trade, that he probably would have been the T-Wolves draft pick regardless. Yeah. If he was there. I don't know where they would have drafted at, but to me, I look at
seventh.
This. Tibbs is a good barometer for basketball players, in my opinion, and if he likes a guy as a basketball player, I think that's something that you have to listen to.
Yeah.
So
I see the Bucks. Speaking of coaches and that, I see the Bucks whack Jason Kidd.
why are they off to a slow start?
No, they're 24-22.
Well, why did they whack Jason Kidd? Is there a reason for that?
Well,
I thought
there has been, as they said, a mid-season slide that has left them in eighth place in the Eastern Conference. It was a surprising end to Kidd's 3+ seasons.
That is a surprising end.
I can't say his name, so I'll just refer to him as the Greek Freak. Giannis Santa, it turned into an all-star under his watch, and the Bucks were considered an emerging force. But the Bucks had lost 4 of their last 5 games to fall to 23-22, entering their game Monday night. Assistant Joe Prunty served as interim coach.
Any word on is Joe going to finish out the year, or are they going to bring somebody else in?
They just said interim coach.
Is there any dynamo out there that's going to come in and
who knows? I also see
save the day.
I also see that, as expected, Pat Shurmur was hired as the Giants head coach.
The other day, somebody at the library asked me, what do you think about Pat Shurmur? I mean, I'm like, to me, who knows? I mean,
Yeah.
I got to tell you, who expected Sam Bradford goes down, Teddy Bridgewater's still hurt, Case Keenum comes in and shows that he could actually be an effective quarterback in the National Football League. Now, is that on Pat Shurmur? They make a lot of the fact Dalvin Cook went down early with an injury. I can't remember the name of the running back that took his place, but he did well as well. Is that on the coach or is that on the players? I'm not sure. I mean, I'm not going to discount what the coach does at all, but you have to give some credit to some of these players. And is Shurmur one of these guys? Or you could say this about anybody. You could say Shurmur, Nagy, whoever. Is he basically in a strong organization where he looks good as well as, just like everybody else in the organization does? Or is he going to be a good head coach? Who knows? I don't know.
Some of it's the organization.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody thinks that if you've worked for the Patriots, you're going to be a great head coach, but yet the Belichick tree has not had terrible success.
No, I noticed when Matt Patricia's name was out there, and then finally he was hired by the Lions. One of the papers or one of the news sources on the internet.
He can't be hired yet because
that's right. But I think he's the
heir apparent.
But he. Somebody was knocking him because the Patriots defense got off to a slow start. And when I saw, just before the season started, there was something trending on Yahoo. And I looked at this guy. I saw he was a football player, Cassius Marsh, I think. And the Patriots had picked up Cassius Marsh from the Seattle Seahawks just prior to week 1. And I'm thinking, boy, the Patriots might be in trouble. They're picking up a guy who doesn't even start for the Seahawks, and are they going to plug him in somewhere? Well, Cassius Marsh didn't make it through the whole season. Matt Patricia and the Patriots steadied the course, and really their defense did a great job after the first 2-3 games. And the media seems to think, well, what's wrong with Patricia? They had a couple of bad games to start the season, instead of looking at the fact that I thought they were going to get hammered the whole season, and somehow they righted the course. Now, whose brainchild that is? Is it everybody getting their heads together? Is it Patricia on his own? It's probably a number of people getting together and saying this is what we need to do. But they totally turned that situation around. I thought the Patriots were going to let up big-time points all the way through the season, and they didn't. So I would say Matt Patricia is a guy that I would really think possibly could do a good job there in Detroit, because I think he really had a lot to do with that Patriots defense.
I think so, too.
And it's hard to do once the season starts.
Now, I noticed, and it's going to be I'm trying to think who still has openings. The Cards picked the Panthers defensive coordinator, Steve Wilkes, is their new head coach.
Oh, he did? Okay. Steve Wilkes.
Yeah.
What happened to Bruce Arians? I thought he was
He
a
retired.
genius.
He retired.
Wasn't he a genius until he became not a genius?
Until he wasn't a genius.
Yeah,
that's
anymore,
that's every coach.
Yeah,
They-
that's
when
right.
they have a good season, they're a genius,
Yeah.
and then they, go 5-11, and they're an idiot.
Yeah, everybody was salivating that the Bears picked, who was it? Was it Fox or was it Trustman over Arians?
Trustman.
Yeah. I guess
Now
he wasn't that much of a genius.
it's also interesting that multiple outlets reported the Browns are hiring former Steelers offensive coordinator
Todd Haley.
Todd Haley as their OC.
Well, there's a good question for you. How come the Steelers scored 42 points in a playoff game and lost, and the OC is the one who got whacked? The defense is the one who gave
The
up 45
defense would
points.
be the one you'd have to look at.
I really question that. And then I saw something about Roethlisberger was really upset with Mike Tomlin about what I don't know. But I did you see that game at all? How the heck did that happen? The Jags beat them.
I was
Jags
going to
beating
turn.
them
I was
doesn't-
going to turn the game on, and I checked the score, and I went, it's out of hand. And then late in the game, I see what happened. And I immediately went for the TV.
The Jags beating them I don't think is a super huge upset because I think the Jags have a good team.
I think Jags are
But
good.
the Jags scoring 45 points is the thing that opened my eyes. And when I looked at that score, I'm like, you got to be kidding me. 45-42? Holy mackerel.
Yeah.
Oh, but Todd Haley is whacked.
Todd Haley is whacked, and I guess he's going to go to Cleveland and take over the play calling from
Hugh Jackson.
Hugh Jackson.
Jackson's been doing
And
the
I'm
play
sure,
calling.
maybe Hugh, after going 1-31 his first two seasons, is going to look at Todd Haley as going, here's the guy that's going to replace me if we don't do anything well.
Now you could look at Hugh Jackson though and say there's a well-respected coach because wasn't he in Oakland and
Yeah, he
didn't do
was.
well?
Yeah.
Now he's in Cleveland, didn't do well, but they held on to him, and I hear good things about him. So
I heard the same thing too. That he's always a good coach, but boy,
not a good record.
the record.
Now they're talking. I saw two. I checked out two different NFL fantasy draft sites today. And one of them had Sam
I haven't
Darnold.
looked yet. I haven't looked yet at any of them.
One of them had Sam Darnold as the first pick, and the other one had Saquon Barkley as the first pick.
Okay.
Both for the Browns. The Browns have two of the first three picks. I think.
Yeah, I think so.
You know what I?
I had to laugh. You talk about those fantasy draft sites, and I saw a Twitter feed about somebody. Mel Kiper has posted his first fantasy draft, and he listed the two players that would be number 1 and number 2 in the first response was from Ryan Leaf, and he went, big deal. He picked me number 1. All right, let's take a break. We'll come right back.
You are listening to Armchair Experts from the John DeVito Broadcast Center on Jack FM, 89.7 WRHS FM Norwich, and the Windy City Hometown Entertainment Network on Wednesday, January the 24th, the year 2018, with Jim Leon and Rich Massaro. And this is Jack FM, 89.7 WRHS FM Norwich, Illinois. And now back to Armchair Experts with Jim and Rich.
Jim, I was going to ask you.
Thank you, Doctor.
Thanks, John. I was going to ask you. Now, it's interesting that, and of course, it's just a fantasy draft that may not be what the Browns would do, but that in the fantasy draft they picked two, high-profile offensive players from college. But there are two really solid, really good offensive linemen that are in the draft from Notre Dame, McGlinchey and Nelson. And I'm thinking a team like the Browns, the sexy thing to do is to pick another QB, yet another QB,
Yet another
and a
QB.
running back. But, aren't the guys up front the guys who really make things go?
Absolutely.
And, maybe they should be thinking about the Notre Dame guys instead of the
absolutely.
You
know what? And I'm wondering. I know they're still trying to adapt the idea, because I can't think of who they got in their who they hired in their front office, but he's a baseball guy. They're trying to adapt the idea of analytics.
Yeah.
To football, and I'm not sure if that can work.
Well, what are they trying? What's the?
I don't.
What way are they trying? To
I don't know. I don't know. But I'm trying to think what this baseball guy is trying to do in there, and I'd have to go back and look because I can't think of his name.
Yeah,
Sometimes I think we really should prepare more.
I thought it was the guy that they hired. I thought was Dorsey, who had been the GM of the Chiefs at one point.
They did hire him. But there is somebody else, I think, still in their office.
Okay.
Who came from a baseball background.
Okay.
And I almost want to say he might have been out in Oakland.
Thanks, John.
At some point.
Okay, I don't know. I don't know about that, but I know they hired Dorsey from the Chiefs, and that's that he's the GM.
And the question, I think the question when they hired Dorsey was, is so-and-so going to remain with the team in his function?
Okay.
And the answer, I think, at that point was yes.
Okay. Well, analytics. I would say that football has already got a lot of stats that deal with the, you've got time of possession. You've got, obviously the QB rating has been a factor for many years. I don't know how good it is, but it's there.
And you're tracking, and now you're tracking with receivers, number of targets, number of catches.
Yeah.
Which gives you an idea of their effectiveness.
Mm-hmm.
How do you measure the effectiveness of the offensive line? How do you measure the effectiveness? Oh, the defensive line, you have a certain amount, your defense. You can measure it by sacks,
sure,
block passes, whatever. How do you measure the effectiveness of your offensive line?
Well, that's what that's where you have film study and the coaches. Here's the thing. You have to know exactly what the offensive lineman is supposed to do against any defensive formation in order to judge that anyway. And I thought that publications like Pro Football Focus and those types of things already rated offensive linemen on categories that they have. So, and I'm not sure, I can't name you any of the categories, but I'm pretty sure that they do have different categories for offensive linemen. How good they are or how accurate they are, you would have to ask somebody who's involved in pro football. But no.
All right. When the football magazines come out this summer, I'll have to.
Yeah, take a look.
I'll have to take a look.
I think there's some categories dealing with the offensive line.
Okay, then I'm going to have to start when the football magazines come out. Okay, there.
No. That was like when I went to a thing at Eisenhower Library where they had a guy who, and I think this group eventually sold their product to a lot of the Major League Baseball organizations, but it had to do with defensive stats. And at that point in time, which is probably going back 10 years when I saw this presentation, the one position they hadn't really figured out how to judge was catcher. Now, maybe since then they've done that because you hear a lot about pitch
framing,
and all that.
Which you made fun of.
I make fun of it because I was taught that from the time I was in minor league baseball, and I'm not talking about professional minor league baseball. I'm talking about when I was 8 or 9 years old.
Little league minor league baseball.
So yeah, so that's I'm not going to say every let me say this. I think there's some really excellent coaches out there now who really, really know their stuff. But I think at the same time, there are probably less coaches at all levels who know what they're talking about than there were when we were kids. If you played Little League baseball, say here in Norwich, or maybe it could have been any place else, you probably would have run into a lot of men who were coaching that knew the game, and you learned the game pretty well. I don't know that you could say the same thing today. But, I mean, there are guys who are out there who do an outstanding job, but it's those guys, I think, mostly are now confined to travel teams and whatnot. So there's not maybe the fact that I'm poo-pooing pitch framing has to do with when I grew up more than it is a necessity. It is something you should do, but maybe not everybody is learning it when they start to catch.
Yeah, and I think just like you said, I think most of the better coaches in youth baseball probably have migrated to those travel teams.
Yeah, I think the stronger coaches definitely have. So
There's still Little League baseball here, isn't there?
Yeah, I think they just had a sign up. I think they're combined. I think they're combined with Howard Heights and,
now.
Yeah, and I would say Little League baseball, from what I've seen in general, is not what it was, at least in this area. I could remember Jim playing, and I don't think I'm overstating it, but you might have a guy or two on your team that was just out and out not a good player, played just because maybe that was the thing to do or his parents wanted him to. But I would say generally most of the guys on most of the Little League teams, they could pick up a ball and they could throw it, and they could, they at least they were good. I mean, they were solid, you could say. I don't think you could say the same thing today. But it goes back to, when we were kids, we didn't just rely on one Little League practice a week and a couple Little League games a week to develop our games. We played a lot of baseball on our own.
We played in the streets. We went to the playground.
Yeah. So we were playing a lot more, and I think that really helped us.
Even threw the ball against the steps.
All the time.
Yeah.
I mean, running bases if you only had two or three guys or whatever.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I just think what you see now is not only are other sports eating into the guys who might normally be in the baseball player pool, but the guys who are playing baseball, I don't think very few of them play enough. So, and I think the other thing is there's a happy medium there too. I think it's a great thing for kids to be out and being kids and playing on their own versus kids who are playing a 60-game schedule. And I think that's a little, in my mind, that's a little too much. If you play 100 games on the street, I think it's great. If you play 60 organized games, because it's a totally different thing. If you need to throttle back a little bit on the street, you can do it, and it's not a big deal. If you're in a competitive game, you can't do that, even if you need to. Say you're hurting a little bit or whatever, or you're tired. You can't do that. You're competing. So I think in some cases they're playing too much organized, and they're not playing enough unorganized.
Yeah.
So
we had a discussion a couple of months back. We started on it a little bit about youth sports and the cost of that, and I don't think we ever got too deep into it. But I know, just especially with the instance of baseball and travel teams, you got kids that show up at some time, and show up at some places, and they're like a free agent.
Oh, there's no doubt about that. There is no doubt. I mean, and the problem with that is, Jim, when you say your parents have paid to play on this team, whatever it costs, and all of a sudden, as you say, a free agent shows up and he plays your position, and the coaches have picked him up because they think he's better than you are. What happened to your money?
Yeah.
What happened to the time that you were going to get playing baseball and the money you paid for it? I think it's honestly, I don't think Little League is ideal, but I think Little League was a much better concept than travel ball. for that reason. I know that the rules were when we started playing that, say you were a 9-year-old that was playing Little League instead of minor league, or a 10-year-old, you're pretty young, you would be guaranteed at least a couple of innings a game. You know, your parents knew those were the rules going in, so they could make that decision. You want to do that? You want to pay for your son or daughter these days to play, and know that it's possible they could be playing only a couple innings a game, and you make that decision. And even if you make the decision and they only play a couple innings a game, the cost is not the same as for a travel team.
Mm-hmm.
So I see Little League as more of a little bit healthier situation. And I've seen some good travel teams. Mike Ferry and Rich Ruffalo ran a team here, and the name of the team is not going to come to me. But once in a while, I'd pass by the park on a Saturday early evening, and their team would be playing. And not too many Little League games or that age group game interest me that much. But I would stop and see their games because their kids were so well coached and did all the little things well. And so I would stop and watch a couple innings. They did a really nice job with their team. But again, I had heard from parents that I knew that had kids on the team that free agent thing would, even with them, would come into play.
Sure.
I mean, because they were competitive guys. They wanted to win as well as teach, and they did both.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Okay. So the Super Bowl pregame show started Sunday, right?
What? It started Sunday.
Didn't it start Sunday? The pregame show start right after the game?
Oh man, I hope I'm avoiding that like the plague. I'm telling you, I'll be Super Bowled out before the first kickoff. Do you remember
Pat? What am I saying, Pat? Dana asked me. She said, "Why do they wait 2 weeks?" I said, "Hype."
You remember, Jim? Though I don't know how many years it was, but I thought there was a couple years a while back that they did a 1 week thing.
They did, and I think they did it one year where the wherever the game was being played that year. I think the Pro Bowl was the day before.
Okay,
and then the next day was the Super Bowl.
When is the Pro Bowl now? Is it after the Super Bowl?
No, I think it's this weekend.
It's this weekend?
It's this weekend, and the game's in Orlando.
Okay.
So that's 60 minutes of no blocking.
Yeah, that's just it's not a real. Did you hear one day Tommy had a basketball game on? It wasn't the Bulls. It was, a national game. And who's the old coach of the Knicks that does the color? Van Gundy, Jeff Van Gundy.
Jeff Van Gundy.
He was on. And he was really frank. He said, you know what? He said, they should not even play. They were talking about the NBA All-Star game. He said, they shouldn't even play the game.
No.
He said, let everybody show up and party and everything else.
Do the skills.
And he says, but don't play the game. The game is horrible. He said, there's no reason to play the game. And I'm like, wow, that's really blunt and honest. He must have a good contract or something. But I agree with him. Why are you even doing this?
I would agree to him.
The only
agree with him,
All-Star game, and it's always been the best, is baseball.
Mm-hmm.
Baseball, you don't. Nobody's lobbing the ball up there so you can hit it out of the park. Mm-hmm. I mean, they're still throwing their stuff, and you have to hit it, and it's.
And honestly, you see some guys out there who are actually having fun.
Mm-hmm. That's true too.
Former teammates against each other, playing with each other. It looks like they enjoy themselves.
Yeah, well, I think it's a great great game.
I always remember one year. I think it was even after he retired. Lasorda was the third base coach.
Okay.
And they had mic'd him during the game.
Okay.
And there was a liner tearing down the third base line that he had to duck, and I think it just about undressed him with that. And the American League dugout is right over there, and he's talking to them. And whoever was doing the play, it was probably Fox, so it was probably Buck. He said, we had Tommy Lasorda mic'd, and we thought it would be interesting to hear his comments after that. Unfortunately, none of those are suitable for airplay.
Jim, you know what? I wanted to ask you before we, because we only got 15 minutes. Did you watch the Patriots and Jags? Did you say?
I watched most of that game, yeah.
I have to say, I am not a Patriots basher. I really like Brady and Belichick, and I like the whole Patriots deal. I'm into the dynasty thing. I like that. I think, in my mind, it's always been a good thing because you see some quality, whether it was the Yankees in baseball or the Celtics in basketball. But I've seen, I'll just say, I'm not going to overstate it, I've seen parts of 3 or 4 Patriots games this year. And I have to tell you, the Patriots are getting every call. Every call that needs to be gotten, they're getting.
A lot of people say that.
And you know what? There's been other front-running teams that I've rooted for. I didn't see it quite that way. But I'm telling you, the Patriots are getting a lot of calls. A lot. And and it's helping. I mean, it's helping them win games.
I didn't see, at least in the parts of it that I saw, a couple of calls I immediately questioned when the flag was thrown.
Mm-hmm.
I said, "Oh, great! Here goes the Patriots getting another call."
Mm-hmm.
And then I saw the replay, and they were right.
Yeah, well, obviously, sometimes the calls are going to be right, but there's some of them that have been really, a little questionable.
I didn't question anything else. The thing I'm going to have to wonder about is Gronkowski. Now, granted, since the start of last season, the Patriots are 12-1 without Gronkowski, and they've actually scored more points per game without Gronkowski, although their yards per play have declined.
Pete, one of the chess guys at the Eisenhower,
Love
who's
Pete.
he's not a sports guy, but he
He'll
tries to keep up. I think he tries to be well-rounded. He says to me last Friday, "Well, don't you think Gronkowski's the most valuable player in the league?" I said, "No."
No.
And he said, "Well, the Patriots, they can't win without him." I said, "Pete, I don't know what the stats are, but first off, they've lost games with him, and I know they've won games without him because he's been hurt." I said, he said, "Well, who do you think is the most MVP?" So right off the top of my head, I just said, "Well, Brady," which probably is true. But he sort of was skeptical, and I'm like, "Well," Gronk's a great player, but he's had his injury issues, and the Patriots have managed to persevere without him. So. I think he would be. He's a guy that you definitely, if you're the Patriots, you want in this game. You don't want to go into this game without him because he is very valuable for sure. But I mean, that doesn't mean that they can't win without him either.
The only problem they have is there's not really much depth behind him.
Mm-hmm.
You've got Dwayne Allen and Jacob Hollister behind him. Allen with 10 receptions for 86 yards and a touchdown, and Hollister with 4 catches for 42 yards, and didn't even suit up against the Jaguars.
You know what, though, Jim? The Patriots, if you said the Patriots to somebody, you'd say, well, Brady and, offense and that. But when you really think about the Patriots, you just named the 2 backup tight ends, and I think I might have heard of Dwayne Allen, the other player I don't know. But when you think about, you got Danny Amendola, Chris Hogan, was it Brandon Cooks? I don't know who else there. I might be missing a guy. Are they good receivers? Yeah. But there's teams in the league who have way better receiving cores than the Patriots, and the Patriots continue to win. I think the Patriots' magic is, Brady in general gets really good protection. You see that when they need to run and they want to run, they can run.
Is it
I think their offensive line is outstanding.
Mm-hmm.
And
I was going to say, is it the players or is it the system?
Yeah, I'm not going to say the system, but I think the unsung heroes are probably the old offensive
line.
I mean, and over the years, those guys have changed, but they've always had good, solid players up front.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the key, because you had years when you had really outstanding guys like Randy Moss in the mix. You had Gronkowski and Hernandez when he was around, two great tight ends, at the same time. But then you've also had, Danny, what's his name? Is it Danny Woodhead, the guy, little running back they had?
I think that's
who's the other guy, the small guy that they had for. I think he went to Denver. Wes Welker. Those guys are not super star receivers, but they always got the job done, and I think part of it is Brady knows when to deliver the ball. Part of it is he gets time to deliver it. So
better than anybody.
Yeah, he is way better than anybody.
I know we've talked about this before. You've always viewed probably the best to play the position as Johnny Unitas.
Mm-hmm.
You still say that, looking at Brady?
I think Unitas is the prototype. I'll fall back on this, Jim. I think Brady, Aaron Rodgers, Unitas, Montana, and there's probably a heap of other guys all can be in that conversation. But Brady, obviously, what is this? If they win, this would be the 6th Super Bowl they've won.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't know how anybody could top that record.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd say Brady's right there. I mean, and obviously he's lasted longer than Unitas, and
still wants to play.
And still, I'm sure he'll be back.
He still wants to play. Drew Brees still wants to play. And I thought,
well, Drew Brees, another really good quarterback.
There was somebody else. Somebody other name bandied about. I can't remember who.
What, as far as what, Jim?
Coming back next year.
Roethlisberger back. Yeah. And just think what good quarterbacks Brees and Roethlisberger are, but they're overshadowed by Rodgers and Brady. Those guys are very good quarterbacks.
Yeah.
You know what I would say about Brady, though? I know now I've seen some things on the internet, people throwing Brady against Montana. I would say I've never been a big one for, being arm strength the overall judging factor. But if you have two guys and you want to compare them, I'd say Brady, not knocking Joe Montana, a great quarterback, but Brady is a much better downfield thrower than Montana, I would say. So I think if you want to start to compare, Montana made his bones in the West Coast offense, and
right. The shorter passes,
the shorter passes, and nothing wrong with that. But I think Brady is more versatile as far as the types of throws that he's able to make.
That's a good point. I really didn't even give that much thought. So the numbers, the important numbers. The game opened up New England minus 6.5. Now it's New England minus 5.5, and the over/under is 48. I think it's going to be under.
My first thought is it's going to be under. And you're saying New England is the underdog?
No. I said New England minus 5.5.
Oh, in New England minus 5. Okay, so Philly is getting 5.5 to start off. I don't like that. I think I'd like to see the points be a little more. I think it's a closer call than that. I don't see 5.5 points. I think is a lot. I think Philly's got a really great shot to win the game.
I think they do too, and I think that's going to be great if you have your backup quarterback suddenly come out and take you to win a Super Bowl.
How great will it be next year when you got both of the quarterbacks back? Wentz and Foles both back.
Both back.
Yeah. That could be a difficult situation. But yeah, I think actually this morning I was thinking about this.
I'm like you. I don't particularly care for the spread, but the under intrigues me.
I like the under, and I like the under. Yeah, I agree with you there.
I may have to go out to a offshore board and
there you go
and visit. Visit. I have to see what's left in my account.
Hey, before we go, Jim, because we don't have much time, what's happening in Cubby Land? Somebody said to me the other day, "Hey, the Cubs don't have a closer." I said, "I think they know who the closer is, but I don't know how much closing he's done.
They signed Steve Cishek, and I think he's closed in the past, but I don't think they're viewing him as a closer right now.
I think Morrow's the guy they're viewing as the closer.
I think they're viewing him. Now, I understand from driving here today, they're in serious talks with Yu Darvish.
Oh, they are?
Yeah. And the question is Darvish, really worth 5 years?
Wow. I could see why that would be a difficult question to answer.
And the other issue is, apparently the offer to Arrieta was 4 years at 110, which comes to 27.5. Is anybody really worth 27.5? You've got Arrieta, whose velocity is starting to decline.
Mm-hmm.
You have Darvish, whose velocity was better than it ever was, 2 years removed from Tommy John surgery, but just stunk out the place during the World Series.
Yeah, I sort of look at the guy who, if Arrieta is not going to be back, then I'm going to say if, because boy, he's been out there now a long time.
There are I saw something on Fangraphs, and I didn't go look at the article, other than the little blurb on it. I should have clicked and looked on the article. There's apparently 150 free agents out there right now. And, you think about this, and it's maybe something we're going to have to get into next time. I don't want to go over today because I got to run.
Yeah.
Think about the structure, and, you think about this. You pay players the minimum and reasonable increases, I guess, to the point where they hit arbitration. Then those years when they're in arbitration, they try to get the bigger bucks. And when it gets to the point where they hit free agency, well, you know what? In most instances, you're going to start to be on the declining side of your contract.
Yeah.
Do you still want to pay them? Or are they finally realizing that now?
Yeah, that's a good. And oh boy, you're bringing up a great point. And we don't have the time to talk about it. My thought when you were talking about Darvish, I would like to see the Cubs, if it's not going to be Arrieta back with them, pick up a guy with a little bit more. I would favor a guy like Cobb, a guy who I see more as. I hate to disparage Darvish because he could be. We're judging him maybe on one bad series.
Yeah.
But I'd like to see a guy with a little more of a bulldog attitude, and maybe Darvish is that guy, and I just don't know it. But I want to see somebody with a Jake type persona, to fill Jake's spot.
Yeah, I agree. Maybe we'll get into that the next time.
Yeah,
John, wake up. Okay. I see him sitting in the other room there, and his eyes are closed. All right, we got to get out of here. Or at least, for sure, I got to get out of here.
All righty.
All right, we'll do this again in a couple of weeks or so. I think we're going to move the next time. We'll move our recording date. But we'll talk about that off the air.
Yeah, let's do that.
I don't want to get you into the technical stuff now. But anyhow, I hope you enjoyed this. We'll get together in a couple of weeks and do this nonsense all over again. You can look for us out on Facebook. As soon as I see John has put it up there, you can look for us on Armchair Experts at
89.7.
89.5. Yeah, thank you. I forgot the whole thing. It's too long of a thing to say.
Yeah.
But anyhow, we'll be out there and you can listen to our nonsense again. And I think we're up to 26 likes. Woo!
Ooh, man.
All right, let's see if we can get 30.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks for listening. We are Taillights.
You have been listening to Armchair Experts from the John DeVita Broadcast Center on Wednesday, January 24th on Jack FM 89.7 WRHS FM Norge and the Windy City Hometown Entertainment with Jim Leon and Rich Massaro. This broadcast was directed by John Navetta, and our special thanks to radio station manager Kevin Zeflik of WRHS-FM Norwich and the executive producer of Windy City Hometown Entertainment Network, Mr. John Seconda. This broadcast was pre-recorded on Tuesday, January the 23rd, year 2018. Until next time, friends, please be safe and thanks for listening. And this is Jack FM 89.7 WRHS FM, Norwich, Illinois.